So yeah, I'm here to talk. I'll talk a little bit about the magazine, a little bit about this particular feature, which is all about you all, the people who involved in the hobby. So, and I call it ordinary people, not that any of you are ordinary, doing extraordinary things. And the more I look into it, it's interesting. People in this hobby are multidimensional. And when we do these interviews with people, we find out just how interesting they are. It's also, you chat with them at a star party, find out not only do they do this stuff, but a lot of other stuff that's really interesting. For instance, today I found out that Sergio, on top of being a producer, master videographer, incredible singer, as I saw him do the anthem at an event. Like, who knew? So yeah, the more you get to know people, yeah, mad props. So the more you get to know the people in this hobby, the more wowed you are by just all the different things that they do. So these are people engaged in the art of astronomical pursuit. Merriam-Webster calls an explorer a person. I call them cosmic explorers, a person who searches for geographic or scientific information. Some of us do both. Some of us stick more with the location. But I want to quote somebody. How many of you knew Tippy D'Auria? Yeah, founder of the Winter Star Party. Really miss Tippy. And he wrote a couple things, and I'll get into that. But he started up with this thing that just is two quotes from him that are absolutely spot on. He says, "The allure of astronomy is twofold. It compels us mentally and aesthetically. The thrill of discovery and the majesty of space's colossal beauties are like a magnet to our hearts and minds. Each time we go observing, we find an object or two that could easily be compared to the gems in a giant treasure chest, and each time we look into the chest, we find new and more beautiful jewels." That's what these star parties are all about, why they're called Tippy, the celestial pirate. And I found that astronomers are discoverers in all. This was a toilet paper roll at an astronomy enclave that I went to. And as you can see, and this is also a topic I try to avoid when I do outreach at in schools. You know, second and third grade are generally okay. Fourth grade, by the time you get to fifth and sixth, you definitely want to try and avoid the seventh planet. And they will prompt you into it in various ways. They're just try and dance around it. But hey, you can't talk about astronomy without that. So I'll tell you a little bit about the magazine and its background. A lot of you are familiar with it, so I'll go through this quickly. But there were two magazines back, Deep Sky, which was published by David Eicher. Later, he was the editor for Astronomy Magazine and Telescope Making, and by Richard Berry, who was also a former editor of Astronomy Magazine. And those were Tom Clark's favorite magazines, and they were published in the 70s, 80s, and when they stopped publishing in the early 90s, Tom said, well, nobody else is going to pick up the mantle. I'm going to do something and combine those two things. So I'm going to come up with a magazine about telescope making and observing. And in that first issue, among other things, a whopping 34 pages long, and I think it had 2 ads in it, but he talked to Tippy D'Auria. They did an interview and found out about what's involved with putting together a major star party, which was this star party, which has an incredible history. So talked about it in about 1994. And I couldn't find another quote that's any better than Tippy's. And one of the cool things about writing, and I'll talk a little bit about that, is I can go back, I miss Tippy, and when I want to, I can go back and read the things he wrote, and you spend some time with Tippy. When you write, you leave a legacy of your thoughts, and that's what we're all about. So it's pretty cool. But here's what Tippy said. There is one more aspect of amateur astronomy that is unique, and that's the people. If you couple an intellect that's sharp enough to grasp the size and complexity of space with a person that laughs at our own monumental insignificance, you are sure to end up with the most amazing people on Earth. It is the combination of all these things that prompts us to work so hard in setting up a major star party. Great, that's a perfect quote. Running a star party is not an easy thing, putting it all together, but it's worthwhile because essentially all of you. So Tom Clark, and people have asked, give an update. Tom Clark started the magazine. He was a retired machinist, turned telescope maker, made Tektron telescopes. It's been a while, so you don't see too many of them anymore. Occasionally I do run into them. And at first when he talked about making that rather ugly but functional 42-inch beast, he called it, the 42-inch telescope housed in a dome. He also ran the Chiefland Astronomy Field, which is a great resource for the community up in that area, and still is. I'm happy to say the new owners are doing a phenomenal job with that. So anyway, Tom and his wife Jeannie, who was actually a very accomplished observer, and she actually got Tom into it because Tom bought her this telescope. I think it was like a 17-inch Coulter, and he thought it'd show up like 17, you know, a small telescope or something, and it ended up this big telescope, and he says, I had to be the porter for the big telescope. So he got involved, and somebody at the local club asked him what he thought of the big scope, because it was the latest and greatest thing at that time. He goes, it was a little disappointing. I looked at stars and I couldn't see any planets going around them or anything. So our expectations you have to be managed in this hobby. They did move out to Arizona, and they're doing well. For the people who asked, Tom had a minor stroke, lost a little bit of ability in one arm, but is still, he and Jeannie still doing well. It hasn't hampered him from playing golf, so he's doing that. The other part of this Star Party, the Star People feature that we've done ever since the first issue is Robert Reeves, who's an author, authored a number of books, and I call him the Moon Man. He knows incredible depth, everything about the moon. Ewan Whitaker, who's the middle one in the middle, they're named a number of the features on the moon, well known, and they're friends, and Robert inherited a lot of original plates from him. But anyway, so Robert started off with this whole thing, and originally David Eicher wanted to turn this into a book. That never happened, so we just kept on going with the feature anyway, and you know, who knows, at some point make an interesting book. But if you're not familiar, Robert does phenomenal lunar photography, and I give a plug for his book, not just because he's a friend, because it's actually an excellent resource if you observe the moon. So he just put out Exploring the Moon with Robert Reeves, and again, he has encyclopedic knowledge. There's one other lunar resource if you're interested in observing the moon. It's a 3-volume set, Luna Cognita. So don't give a whole lot of recommendations, but that's well worthwhile if you want to observe the moon, those 2 resources. So Robert started that whole thing off, and then I entered the picture later on. My story actually starts a little south of here, was living in Miami. For those who know, Dinner Key Marina in Coconut Grove on a boat. So we lived on a boat. My dad was a little unconventional. He was a school teacher, and in the summers cast off the lines, and we would go cruising the Bahamas and Virgin Islands. I know you feel sorry for me. That's a terrible, terrible way to grow up. But back then there was no GPS, so he taught me celestial navigation. We had to use a ship's compass and chronometer and charts. Gave me a love of charts. We go out there, and that was how you've had to find your way around. And had a great deal of respect for the ocean. When you're out of sight of land for a couple of days, you can't miss by much, and you have to include currents. But anyway, so that was my introduction to celestial navigation, but also the night sky. We didn't have a generator, and we'd sit on the deck at night under unbelievably gorgeous skies, and we'd look at the stars. Mom would point out, you know, whatever constellation she could remember from college, and Dad would elaborate with modified Greek stories, which I think went far afield from the original. It started somewhere close, but it was our entertainment at night. And as we were getting ready to go back, we'd have the Perseid meteor showers, and I have to tell you, from a remote at that time, the uninhabited islands, you're in a cay there, and to see the Perseid meteor showers reflected in the water is right up there with the best things on earth. So anyway, life got in the way. I didn't see dark skies for a long time. I did all this stuff, corporate moves, ended up in Dallas. Had interest when I'd see a comet and stuff like that, but then my wife is really at fault. She bought me a telescope. It was actually a go-to telescope, and I had all my other ones. And the reason was, I was in fairly light polluted skies, so it kind of taught me where stuff was, and I actually used a chart. So some people are like, oh, go-to. I used a chart and a finder, and then the go-to, and it'd be like, wow, dropped it right on there. This is where it is. So it actually taught me the skies. But then when I was out there too, I joined the Dallas Club, and went to my first Star Party, and Dark Sky Star Party TSP, very dark skies out there. And then I was invited to a life-changing event to observe all night, new moon night, in the McDonald 82-inch observatory. That is a spectacular instrument, and I got to tell you, it was amazing. But yeah, it was hard going back from the 82 to a 12-inch telescope. I can tell you that much. It was tough, but it was also my first article. I met Tom out there who was talking at TSB in 2000. And so I immediately subscribed to the magazine, wrote my first article for him. So I later on did a corporate move, came back to the Orlando area in Apopka, and Chiefland was my astronomy home. My wife, Margie, who would join me, she'd be inside in the motorhome. I'd say, come on out, it's a beautiful night. I was imaging and observing, so I'd set up the imaging stuff first. And she said, I'll come out, is the cursing all done yet? So if you remember early days of imaging in the hall, there was a lot of that at the beginning. But Chiefland was a wonderful home. I spent a lot of time with Tom and Jeannie Clark, met a bunch of people, including Tippy O'Neill, a lot of the people that are affiliated with this. Long story short, I used to stay up all night. If you imaged this up on the top, that's the teacher, lawyer, engineer, and astrophotographer. You were just up all night. You had to do it if you wanted something to come out at the end. I'm happy to say everything's automated now, so there's my motor coach. I can be inside, and I can take a power nap on a recliner as it stays going, and most of the time it does good, so I can actually get some sleep. That said, I will tell you I'm happily sleep deprived this week as I've gone around because I want to get my photon fixed. So while it's happily doing its stuff, you can also go and observe and do all that fun stuff. So that's a nice compromise. I do a fair amount of imaging, and I've had 2 years. I shouldn't say that. That's kind of like my guiding is going really well tonight. Something you never say, but I've had 2 really good years where I've gone and weather's been good and collected a lot of data. Actually, most of these I got at WSP at Winter Star Parade this year or last year. There are a couple other ones that didn't. So, I mean, very successful. The Great Lacerda, I just got that at Chiefland with the other, but the Blue Dolphin I got here. So, spectacular opportunity to do some good quality imaging. Not as dark as some places, but the steady skies really make up for it. Planetary is off the charts here. So, over the years, we've featured 208 star people profiles. Last year, I covered 20, so I've only got 188 to do today. So yeah, I need to get going. No, I'm just kidding. We'll select a few. Needless to say, I could do a version 3 and 4 and 5, and that's what this is all about. There's almost endless fascinating people in this hobby, and it keeps us going. So, Sue French, I did profile in the first one. Just want to talk about her briefly in one regard. And the previous speaker talked about it from Sky and Telescope, but Sue French, we kind of saw she was interesting in issue number 14, did an interview with her, and she started to write some articles. Well, we're, unlike Sky and Telescope where you have lots of help, you get very little help from us. You're on your own. I'm just kidding. You're not completely on your own, but yeah, but we're also more flexible in article length and what you do and that type of thing. So it's a little easier to get started, but Sue French wrote an article and found out she's pretty good at it and she actually enjoyed it. And we've had a number of people that did that. Richard Wright, who's an unbelievably good software engineer, he started writing about things and found out, what, he's got a talent for writing too, and he enjoys it. And I'll plug this about writing. How many of you have done some sketching at the eyepiece? Anybody? And we're going to talk about a sketcher in a minute. I am never going to be an illustrator. I can promise you, a professional illustrator. But when I do sketch at the eyepiece, I see much better, much more carefully. I'm more systematic on what I'm looking for. So regardless what the sketch looks like at the end, I've had a more rich experience. Well, I encourage some of you to try writing because it does the same thing. It's like journaling. You're more intentional about the experience and about what you're doing. Why do I find this rewarding? Who are these people that are around me? I mean, it can have a similar effect. So I put her up there. We dove into her last year, but I did want to choose like a perfect example of somebody. You may find a hidden talent that you have. You may find that it just is something you really enjoy doing. So I would be remiss if I didn't remember some of the star people that we have, and these are friends. Unfortunately, this list is getting long. One of the byproducts of getting older. The list of people who preceded us gets longer, and these are a couple of people that I want to mention that we have profiled. Tippy O'Neill, I already mentioned. We did his interview in issue number 13. He was remarkable. If you had a chance to see him do some of his presentations, he was always very creative. Did this one with about a comet with a dirty snowball, which was his dry ice. But he goes back in the old days. He was a electrician on an attack submarine. He's had an asteroid named after him, and just was a great member of this community. Another one of his great presentations, he was talking about distances in space, which is always tough to measure. So he used a roll of toilet paper. Only Tippy would come up with these things, but it is brilliant because it helps people envision things that are very tough to envision. John Dobson, he was his telescope maker as well. John Dobson called his one because it had a styrofoam sleeve out, the coffee cup telescope. And so he had a bit of fame with that, but was a wonderful member of the community, incredible individual. He does leave a legacy with some articles and things he wrote, so I can always visit with him another time. Barbara Wilson, again, I went in more depth in the last presentation, but she truly was one of the premier observers, and back when she got started, there weren't a lot of female observers involved in the hobby. There are a lot now. But I just want to read this one quote to give you an idea who Barbara Wilson was and how she thought. And again, we featured her in the third issue. At the 1992 TSP, we saw the jet in M87 with the 20-inch, and also a newly discovered object that was receding from us at 90% the speed of light. The quasar HS 1946 is 12 billion light years away. 5 years ago, when I saw the dual lens, the 3C273 at 2 billion light years, I couldn't sleep that night. Now you're engaging your gray matter when you see something like that, because it's just a faint fudge. But when you truly understand what it is, I mean, it truly is evidence of Einstein's theory of relativity. I mean, so when you engage that, it makes the hair stand up in your arm. So he said, I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the tent saying, Buster, do you realize we saw an object 2 billion light years away, and now we've seen an object 90% of the way out to the edge of the universe. So interesting stuff. When you hang out with somebody like that, they deepen your appreciation and understanding of things. So John Dobson, again, force of nature is absolutely right. One of the fathers of sidewalk astronomy, but he made telescopes cheaper. I mean, that design, you can't walk anywhere in an amateur field without seeing the impact that John Dobson made. But the other thing was just his, and he made the stuff out of scrap. He would buy these cheap porthole glass and make mirrors out of them, scrap plywood, and put together telescopes. And then he loved to show people the wonders of the universe. A lot of nice stories about him. Someone who wrote for us for a number of years, Deep Sky Treasures, John Davis, passed on. Very kind man. Would always come up to me and speak to me when we had a table at NEAF. And he always come up and he'd renew a dual subscription. I go, John, you're a regular writer. You don't have to. No. He'd give me the check. Well, one time I didn't cash the check, and he sent me another check. So he was just a very kind, supportive man. And it was remarkable. If you've read some of his Deep Sky Treasures articles, he had a unique way of looking at things and kind of bringing you in. That's not an easy thing to do, into the whole experience of observing and kind of star hopping, and gifted individual. Don Parker, I don't have to tell too many people in this area, physician from Coral Gables, incredibly talented. He would sketch with such accuracy that they used him for scientific, to track the different movement on different features on Mars, and was also an imager, telescope maker, and absolutely hilarious. He actually has a feature on the moon named after him. Not a lot of us that have that. And I think even towards the end there came back to the Winter Star Party shortly before he passed. So spent some time with his family. Dave Tostes, and this one was kind of a shock. Dave, good friends of mine. I took this picture out at TSP, his 32-inch telescope, and that's his orchard ladder. Dave would do lots of research before he'd come out. He'd bring out these bins of stuff and look. He would push that telescope to the limits of what you could see. He was one of those guys, friend of Barbara Wilson. You can see him with Barbara Wilson in the picture there. But absolutely fascinating in how he would tie the science and what you could see, again, engage the dark matter, and he would humor me. He would have me confirm, do you see this, or what do you see there? I saw my first Vorwerp, Hannity's Vorwerp. I was like, a what, Dave? A Vor who? Vorwerp, so through his scope. But he also would, every once in a while, break down. We'd look at fun stuff, too, through that beautiful instrument. Dave, again, a family physician, and Dave and I would joke. He was 6 months my junior, and we were joking about we both wanted to retire, and he beat me to the punch there, so he'd always tease me, "You still working?" Yeah. And with his wife, Monica, though, they did have a couple years to travel and do that, and it was kind of sudden with a brain tumor and just kind of a shock and a loss to the amateur community. But again, he leaves by a legacy, behind a legacy of articles and observing articles that are remarkable. Another one, Jack Newton. I mean, we just gave that age, but Jack Newton was the astrophotographer at one time. I met him a number of times up at Chiefland when he had a place there, and later on I'd meet him at some different star parties, but he was an author. His wife, Alice, she actually did a presentation here. She'd do comedic, she was a comedian, essentially. And she talked about, very funny, about being married to a professional or a well-known professional astrophotographer. She said, we live in an observatory attached to a house, was how she described it. And they did have a bed and breakfast that they operate. Has anybody been to, it's one of those bucket list things that, you know, I should have done before, but never did. But they're beautiful. The Clarks did go up there into Canada. They moved locations, I know, but both of them were just gorgeous, looking out over the river there. And they were gracious hosts and remarkable people. And Jack truly was. Tom said, Jack is probably one of the nicest things you ever knew, whether you're sitting under a palm tree here chatting with him about astrophotography, about astronomy in general, or just nothing at all, and just sitting there, and Alice also. So wonderful people there. And very recently, Al Nagler, we lost him. Everybody's familiar with his eyepieces, with his telescopes. The one up on the far side there was one of his early telescopes in cellophane, and down below that, I believe it was Sky Telescope staff. They found his first article that he wrote on optical engineering or something was printed in Mechanics Illustrated, if you remember back then. And so they dug up and actually found a copy of that and presented it to him at Stellophane, which was, I thought, a pretty cool thing. And Al was very gracious. And I have two Al Nagler stories. The first one, my very first star party, 2000. So I'm there with this Meade 10-inch LX200, I think it was. And I had perfectly awful eyepieces. I talked to him at the table and stuff. And I saw him later, and yeah, I think I'm looking at some eyepieces. He brought back this box of very expensive eyepieces, just sat there and said, yeah, I'm over here, just drop them off when you're done with them, try them out. I mean, who does that these days? Yeah, I mean, that's Al Nagler does. And then I was down here with a brand new 20-inch Zambudu mirror, beautiful optics in that. We had incredibly steady skies. And yeah, Saturn that year was just jaw-dropping. But anyway, later on, it was like 2 o'clock, and Al comes over, and I headed on the Whirlpool. And I said, I want to see one of your nice eyepieces in the Whirlpool. So he gets up there, and he was like, wow, he was wowing. I was like, well, okay. He calls his wife, Judy, you got to see this. And Judy's like, Al, I don't climb ladders. And he goes, Judy, it's 2 steps. So my claim to fame, I got Judy Nagler to climb 2 steps to look at the Whirlpool. So, but Al, sweet man, incredibly brilliant engineer, and he changed the face of our hobby. So now back to those who are still with us. Wally, I'll pass through quickly. I went into more detail the last time, but Wally really did change something in our hobby. You know, you see nightscapes everywhere now, and we did that. Wally Pahoka, you know, I think I called him by 8 times, pronounced it wrong. But Wally made absolutely spectacular nightscapes over these iconic landscapes. I mean, he was in Look, Life magazine, National Geographic. He was everywhere. He was one of the first really, I mean, really good, and he was professional photographers. And you can see some of the escapes there, the caves at Kiva, the Grand Tetons. He he essentially was the Ansel Adams of nightscapes at that time, and did beautiful, beautiful work, and actually made a living at it, which was a good thing. So I tried to reproduce this one in Yellowstone. I loved that. I bought a small version of it. And when I was out there, it was like nature does what nature does. It was like 3 days without seeing a single star in the sky, cloud out. I was like, so much for that. So next time I go back, I'll try and reproduce it. But Wally was an inspiration to a number of people, including this guy who did something interesting. So in issue number 78, I met him, I think, at Texas Star Party, and we said, hey, we want to do an interview with you, do a profile. So Babak Tafreshi, he's Iranian. And he started, if you've heard of it, Twan or whatever, the world, the world at night. And it was, the idea is one people, one sky, and he went all over. He is truly an adventurer. You know, there are people, I've traveled some places. He is an adventurer, and I'll tell you, I mean, I've shot the night sky. I haven't shot it with penguins, you know. So, yeah. I haven't done it and he had one particular, but he
You haven't shot with what?
with penguins. Yeah, you can see them with the icebreaker penguins in the Arctic. Yeah, there are limits to where I will drag out a camera and work. But he was, so he ran a Messier marathon out in the middle of the desert somewhere in the Middle East in a caravanserai. I guess that's where, anyway, where caravanserai. And so he has reached more people from more different cultures, but he's in a part of the world where things are not so unified. And so this whole outreach, he was inspired by A Pale Blue Dot, that book, and wanted to kind of bring some kind of unity and commonplace, one people, one sky. So anyway, here's a couple of, a little bit of his work. He's spoken all around the world. He's spoken some different star parties as well, but I mean, he's well received in various places. And just these interesting shots, the star trails with the pictographs from out west, of course, kind of there, and the Methuselah trees, and that one's a temple in Iran, and just out in the middle of the desert. Beautiful shots with Aurora. He's been to Iceland. He's literally traveled all over the world. So down in Africa, went to some very remote places. So I asked him, okay, you've been in, I've had encounters with various creatures and interesting things that happen when you're out at night and if you're out on your own. So he goes, there was one in particular that was, he goes, I've had a lot, but this one in particular I remember. So he goes, I was out at this national park in Africa, very dark. And so you're looking for a foreground when you're doing, to make it interesting, you know, you can shoot the sky, but if you get something in the foreground, adds that extra interest. And so I said, I saw this big round rock, and I thought it'd be perfect to highlight it with my flashlight. And so he highlighted with the flashlight, and the big round rock had two big eyes. And he realized it was a hippopotamus, which is the one creature that can crush a full-grown crocodile in his mouth. So he said, I ran very quickly. I said, I survived, but the equipment and the photo did not. So yeah, he, like I say, truly an adventurer, interesting guy. If you ever get a chance to hear him speak, he's fascinating, does beautiful work. Bob Moore is somebody you may have met. Anybody gone up to NEAF or NEAC? Yeah, Northeast Imaging Conference. Well, Bob organizes that. Fascinating guy, very serious. He gets into the science part of it. He has discovered 6 supernova. His daughter Caroline has discovered 3. And Caroline, and he helps run this thing, the outreach at the National Monument, and they get like 10, 20,000 people. So when you do an outreach, it's a major event. Well, Caroline, ran with it, so he got started. And it's funny because I ask people, when you get started, most of them got started with like a 4-inch Tasco or something like that, something similar. So it doesn't take a lot to light the fire. If any of you do outreach, I would say 90% of the people that say they get hooked the first time I saw Saturn's rings or just high definition craters on the moon, it doesn't take much to light a fire. So when you do outreach, you don't have to do wonders necessarily. So, but anyway, so the daughter Caroline, tell a little bit about her. She turned, so the observatory there was her old playhouse when she was a kid. She got very serious about the science in it. So Dad told her, well, if you're going to do this, we need to build out an observatory, but you need to raise money. So for her high school project, she raised $100,000 from different astronomy vendors to build this thing out, automate it, where they discovered another supernova. And she had opportunity to meet the president and show him. And Bob says, one of the funny, we always ask, what's one of the funniest things you said? He goes, when I was there and I was taking a picture of Carolyn, you see her in the bottom, I should have blown that up more. He goes, and Carolyn's describing how she goes about the supernova searches and how she discovered it. And if you can see there in the corner, he said the expression on Mrs. Obama's face was the funniest thing. She's like, what? But he said, really was humorous. But Carolyn's a fascinating person. Bob Moore is. Get a chance to run into him up at NEAC. It's worth the time. Dave Kriege, another one. We profiled him early in issue number 10. Dave Kriege, a lot of people think he was a professional telescope maker. He's a dentist with a very successful dentistry practice and has never done that full time. But he did start off, and his first telescope was a project, Edmund Scientific Project. His dad got him, and they built a little telescope together. And then he went through, obviously, as a dentist, formal training, everything else, got out, started to practice. But then he was exposed to a Dobson-style telescope, and he had interest. So he got mentored, and he learned how to build a telescope. And then he, went through the whole mirror making and all that stuff, and kind of got ed up with it. As a matter of fact, he said that's how the obsession telescope thing came. He goes, his wife told him, are you working on that damn telescope again? You're obsessed with it. Well, there it is. There's the name for his. So he finally would do it. People at a star party would say, would you make one for me? Well, he taught class. He goes, I want to teach people how to do it. He did a book with Richard Berry, how to build them. He goes, I wanted other people to build them so I could use my telescope at a star party and not just share it. But he did, obviously, obsession telescopes, you'll see them all over, and he actually produced telescopes. But it really impacted the hobby quite a bit. The ultralight, I see a lot of those around. So Dave Kriege's been around for a while. And I want to dispel a myth. So, yeah, it is that you can't buy telescopes and give them to, yes, you can if they're properly labeled. Yeah. Of course, my wife and I have been married now for, I make sure I get this right, they're 47 years, yes. Yeah, okay, 48 this August. And so we've gotten to a point where, where do you get each other and you're retired and stuff. So what we do, we just buy something and we put there, and it's like, Margie, look at that. Look at the new Astro camera that you bought me. That was so thoughtful. And she's like, oh, look at the shoes you bought me, and they're the perfect size. I'm like, isn't it beautiful? So, yeah, we don't have to use sand anymore, but it works for a while. It would have worked earlier in our marriage. So, next guy I want to profile is Carl Zambuto. We did a visit with him in issue number 79. And Carl did, like I say, I've had 2 of his mirrors, and he does phenomenal work. Really was meticulous. Doesn't do them as fast as Mike Lockwood. His specialty was kind of like usually f4.5, maybe a little bit faster at f4 and up. But he was meticulous in the work that he did. His wife at that time, I found out they're no longer together, but she had the Main Street Cookie Company where they went. It's still in business, but apparently Carl and his wife aren't. So, but anyway, he was an interesting person, very gracious. Our writer showed up, and kind of unannounced, he spent the afternoon with him, went out to lunch, and we learned a little bit more. But one of the interesting things that he did, I didn't realize it before that point. He buys these 500-pound sheets of glass and cuts them into squares, and then he puts them, anneals them in an oven and all that stuff. And I asked Mike Lockwood, I go, why would he do that? And he goes, yeah, you save a lot of money doing that, but it's a lot of work. You see him in the bottom corner there with John Dobson doing mirrors for him. When we went to visit him back, and that was back early 2013, I think, he had already made like 2,000 mirrors. So that's a high production. He initially at that time, he was not coating the mirrors. Later he got into coating. That's like a whole nother world. But he did crossed that Rubicon at one point because it got a little harder to find good quality work, so he did it. He announced his retirement at the end of last year, which is going to make a lot of people sad. He's going to fill all the orders. I believe he's going to continue to service his mirrors, if you have one of his mirrors. Again, he's very conscientious. He could always do, I guess, some of the coding, because there aren't a lot of people doing the codings. But Carl Zambuto, you want to find his whole background, you can find it in issue 79. Moving on to somebody else, somebody new. And I met Amy at the Peach State Stargaze, and she was an interesting person who picked up astrophotography pretty quickly. And she obviously had an inquisitive mind and did some really nice work. I was surprised. So when I talked to her, it's fascinating. Yeah, we'd like to do a profile on you. And she had a story about how she got started. I asked, how'd you get into this? And kind of similar thing when she was young. Then she got back to it. But she goes, it really started off as I was a part of this women's photography group. And they had this challenge. So I went out to try and image the Milky Way. She had seen stuff like that. And so it was for that kind of photography club that got her going. Well, then she hooked up with her local club, and kind of remote in Georgia. And I have to get the name of this right. The place where they held their first okay, yes, because I can't get this wrong for the story to work. So the first little club meeting that she went to was being held at Murder Creek Plantation. So that kind of sets the stage in rural Georgia. So she's driving there, never been there before. She gets lost. It's getting around dusk. So this old kind of beat up pickup with gun rack in the back stops. Two guys get out, their faces painted camo, so they're not just in camo. And she's thinking, oh my goodness, this isn't good. They turned out to be very nice, polite, helped her find her way to it. But she said, next time I make sure I'll find to get a little better directions on the way there. So her introduction was a little tenuous. But she got going, got mentored, started doing more astrophotography, and she did some really interesting stuff. Some beautiful. I mean, this is somebody who's just been doing this a couple of years. I know people have been doing it decades. I have trouble matching some of this stuff. Did narrowband. She does beautiful nightscapes. And again, she finds these good foregrounds, which is really part of the key to doing a really nice nightscape. And but the other thing she did, she's inquisitive, and she's like, oh, I wanted to know how to build a dew heater, and how do you do a flat screen? And so she would learn to do it, and she was doing it. She started this YouTube channel. I'm like, well, do some articles on the do-it-yourself stuff. I'm sure a lot of our people do. So she did a series of articles for us, and then she wanted to build a home observatory. I said, okay. She said, that's going to be like a series because it's going to be a big thing. Well, this is what she had envisioned, the little. What woman wouldn't want a little flower box, roll-off observatory? I mean, it's like a little picket fence. It's perfect. Well, the reality of building it was a little more complex, and it got a little bit bigger. But she took us through the whole thing, which was a fascinating process, from permitting and drawings and getting those certified and build out and missteps with grounding and everything else. So it was a fascinating process. Amy did a great job with it. And then she got it, and in the center there, you see kind of like ready for the first light. And 2 months later, due to a job change, they had to sell the house. How'd you talk about tragic? I was like, oh, you're going to make me cry. But anyway, fascinating person, and her full story is in that issue. This group is really interesting because, again, I want to dispel the myth that and you can look around the room and know it's no longer the case. There are a lot of women involved in our hobby at this point, and this group does a really good job on social media of getting these people together. And I won't go in big depth for it, but issue 121, we went into the Astrophiles, and they are a collection of women in Europe, because we have a lot more opportunity for star parties and different get-togethers here in the United States than they did over there. And initially Italian women, and they just wanted to connect on social media and get going. Well, Marcella Bodie did a wonderful job, not just doing that, but actually getting to round up in person, sitting down, getting together for lunch, visiting an observatory, and they got a collection of people that are interested in promoting STEM. This one lady here, Valentina, does incredible paintings, astronomical paintings. There aren't many people doing that. That's just, total solar eclipse that she did, just phenomenal. The gal who was on our cover, and they go, well, she was very photogenic, that's why you put her on the cover. Well, not actually. I mean, yeah, that doesn't hurt, but it's also her phenomenal image. But I said, Marcella, just have some people do like a cover, and I'll decide which cover we do. And there, she did it perfectly formatted, exactly 300 DPI, the perfect size, nice profile in front. And I'm like, it could have been the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I would have put it on there. It was just so easy. It was a plug and play. So beautifully done. But a really nice group. Like I say, they did a good job getting together, and I think that's where the rubber meets the road. Getting together as a collective, encouraging each other, because some of them were learning. I had that when I was beginning to image, or otherwise I would have quit 10 times. But they've done a great job getting together, seeing different things, and they're doing beautiful work. I mean, absolutely high quality. And they don't stop there. It's like if you have an interest, or they'll share poetry and just casual shots with an iPhone, as long as it's astronomy or nature related. But they've got a very creative group and really wonderful and supportive. There are a couple of them I'll just highlight. I mean, you can see the quality work. Christina Cellini was one of the ones that we profiled. I mean, the Sharpless 240, that is a difficult object. That is a really nice, and the tadpoles. There's Luca, and she did this. This was the one that really caught my eye the first time. I was bragging about my 7-hour Pleiades and what I did, and she shot back this 63-hour version of it that blew mine out of the water. I'm like, okay. Flavia Cassini does beautiful narrowband work. Nicoletta, you can see she is just the shy and retiring type. Rosanna Miani, and she just got a solar astronomy picture of the day. She does gorgeous work, and she's very active online. And then Uli Witterfee, she doesn't have an observatory, but I think if I had a deck like that overlooking the Mediterranean, I'd be just fine with it. All these ladies do wonderful work, encouraging, and it's a growing community that uses social media for a very positive thing and to get together and build community. So continuing with that, women in astronomy thing, Erica Ricks, some of you may have seen some of her illustrations, does beautiful work. We tell her whole story, how she got going. But if you think I could never draw like that. But when she got started, she said the first thing she posted was an M42, and people asked her, why are you posting a sketch of a turkey on an astronomical site? So she goes, there's hope for you if you don't do perfect illustrations at this point. Her husband, Paul, is an astrophotographer, and they actually had a his and hers. But she's one of the few people I've seen that does really high-quality solar sketching. That's a different, it might be interesting to reach out and have her share that. That's just a different view, and you have to really, to do that and translate that to paper is a really tough thing. Erica Ricks, interesting person, her whole story in issue number 20. Good friend of mine, Dean Schwarzenberg. Dean is very understated. He is known for his Bloody Marys. He was supposed to come here this time. I'm like, Dean, who's going to make my Bloody Mary? It's a replacement meal, his Bloody Marys, as you can see in the middle there. His wife, Lisa, does performance dog competitions. But Dean does phenomenal astrophotography, but he started this whole thing, and you don't see him much anymore because now with more remote imaging, with these little doghouse blinds. And the first time he showed up with it at Chiefland, we were making fun of him, joking with him, yeah, you're going hunting, whatever. And that night, it got really cold, and there was frost, and we were out there shivering, and Dean is in there with his little heater with his laptops well shielded. And next day, we all went out. That's a lie to us. You can see we got our little camo tents, and we're happy about it. You can see that it's TSP from above. He lives in Kentucky with his wife there. Beautiful 7.5 acres on a lake, and built a gorgeous observatory. Everything he does is meticulous. And behind there is the ultimate toy barn, which has his 35-foot motor home, the casita, all his wife's dog training stuff, and every other toy you can imagine. Dean is also famous, like I say, for his white Russians. So if you're in there, he will share them with you liberally. One Okie text he is known as the pole dancer at Okie-Tex, and people ask about that one. And since he did actually put it on his trailer, a little thing, I could share the story, but it was cloudy. There were a few more White Russians running than usual. Well, Dean comes out the door from inside, even though there's a red light, it was bright, into the total dark. I mean, and when you're shielding the starlight, it's pretty dark. And it's got this little awning off the casita, and it's got one of those little poles. Well, Dean runs smack into it, spins it around 3 times, bends it at about a 40-degree angle, never spilt the drink. That's where he separates himself from mere humans. So we've actually called that, but he does beautiful astrophotography. We call him he can do wonders with an image in about 10 minutes processing time. Has won probably more Star Party photo contests than anybody I know. So, interesting guy. Jeffrey, anybody familiar with Jeffrey? He did a Meteor Man presentation on TV, and fascinating guy. Again, we went in depth with him, all kinds of things. Has a background as a drummer, rock drummer, and he's got so many hobbies. He's like a amateur paleontologist, archaeologist. Collects memorabilia from movies, and I mean just everything. And I said, wow, that's a lot. And he goes, yeah, my mother always said, Jeffrey, can't you just focus on one thing? It's like, apparently not, but he's doing pretty well. So the whole story is amazing, but he develops his own equipment. And one of the ingenious things he does, he has these magnets he drags along behind these vehicles to pick up potential meteorites that would have iron and stuff in them. And it's an interesting series. If you can still find it, it's worth doing. In the article we did on him, you can get a lot of background. But he's found some amazing specimens all through it. Space rocks to go. There he is. And he's had some interesting encounters as well as he's been out there as an adventurer. If you look at the map there, you can see where he's been to collect the different samples. He's been pretty much, I mean, everywhere in the world and some extremely remote locations. So, interesting guy. Occasionally he does show up at Star Parties. If he does, worth the listen. Paul Gardner, we featured in issue number 90. I first met Paul when he was still at UCF. He was a student. He was like 19 years old. And I immediately knew he was somebody different with his energy levels, and a very intelligent young man. He was studying mechanical engineering, optical mechanical engineering. Now his beautiful family, his wife Brittany, and 2 kids. But at that time, he was in the engineering department, but he was hanging out as much with the physics department and the astronomy department, became an assistant director of the observatory there. And from there, he went, my notes aren't showing up on this. Let me give you a little bit of his background, because it's really impressive. So this young man started off, and he said his problem was, so he got hired almost out of college at JPI. And he said the biggest challenge was people taking him seriously. When you're 22 years old, even if you're brilliant, that can be a challenge. So he was hanging out there. Yeah, from there he went on to JPI. After that, he went to that's JPI, the Palomar. So worked for 4.5 years at the Palomar, and then after that, the Giant Magellan Observatory. And he was actually one of 2 engineers responsible for the design, construction, and implementation of the secondary mirror subsystems on the GMT. That's pretty impressive for a young man. And then he started his own consulting firm, and so I had an opportunity to work on just about every phenomenal telescope. He said in interviews, they'd always ask him, what do you want to do in 5 years? Typical interview question. He goes, work on really large telescopes. That was always my answer from my first, it still is. So, and he has been able to do that, but does beautiful astrophotography. He likes to go out in the middle of the desert with his family and hang out with nothing, and has just had a really good life doing that. He's also had the opportunity to set up unique installations at some beautiful places. That bottom right with the pool there, could be worse places to have a nice pier set up out there in the desert. So Paul Gardner, you can read his whole story in issue number 90. Jim Klinkshern, and now I know because John introduced me to him at PSG, And again, background, one of these other people that got started and just did incredible work in a short period of time. And he's one of those unusual people that shoots comets and solar and lunar and deep sky and everything else. I asked him about his observatory build, and he said he got permission to do it because his wife was tired of having all his equipment in the sunroom. So there's a tip for you if you're having trouble with the funding of that project, maybe move your equipment someplace less convenient. He does absolutely gorgeous work, has a great eye, very artistic eye. But the other thing he does, which is phenomenal, again, he's multi-dimensional. He's an incredible nature photographer. He does some of the best owl photography I've ever seen. John says he's an owl whisperer. He goes, he shows up with his camera and they like fly up to him. It's like, I'm just the opposite. They flee from me. So good stuff. He also does beautiful travel photography. He goes all over. Now, I don't know if when you travel, when I went to Rome, at the end of the day, I was just burnt. I was tired. I was done. Have dinner, glass of wine, and I'm out. Well, Jim goes back out so he can photograph the Colosseum at night. And then, I guess he's a lightning whisperer too. He catches that. I was like, how could you? I mean, it's tough enough to go back out after a long day. You go out there and get your night shot. Yeah, lightning strikes right at the center. He's a really fascinating guy. That's his daughter there, and they went over there in Sicily. And he photographed beautiful. I mean, it rains, and then he's like, I got to go out and get the reflection on the lava pavement, and that. Really, truly an artistic guy. And that's his daughter. I mean, because he says, when I tell people that they had lemons in Sicily the size of your head, he goes, how do you do that? Well, you get your daughter stand beside it. That's true. Okay. There's the scale. Fascinating guy. So now, Randy and Pam Shivett. And they're probably well known. Randy, you've been doing, 40 years you've been doing solar astronomy? I apologize to Pam for this one. I couldn't resist. I saw this picture. So her daughter, Kelly, it was Kelly. So her daughter, Kelly, posts, and I busted out laughing. My wife asked me about Kelly posts this and said, find someone in life that looks at you like my mom looks at a loaded baked potato. And I thought, so I was laughing and laughing. So Margie comes over, what are you laughing at? And I read it to her, and she pointed at me and said, that's you. And I said, what? She goes, hey, when we went out to dinner the other night, you looked at that Tres Leche cake. If you'd looked at a woman like that, I slapped you. And I said, hey, it was an exceptional cake. I understand, Pam, as a fellow foodie. I tell people, astronomy and gastronomy are only a G away. There's definitely a relationship there. So most people start with they're going to build a telescope. They build a 4-inch. So that thing, which is essentially a building. So I know Pam identifies with the whole, I live in an observatory attached to a house. So this massive thing was your spectrohelioscope back in the 70s, was it, that you built it? I mean, that's pretty impressive. My 4-inch Tasco doesn't quite line up with that. But an amazing thing, Randy, everything he does is like kind of research grade, goes into it. Pretty impressive, does beautiful solar work. If you haven't seen Randy's work, and he and Pam both sponsor the solar activity page. We've got about 20,000 followers at this point.
Maybe 50,000.
Oh, there you go. Well, that was back a while. So yeah, worth following that. Incredible stuff. This is Randy's idea. So he builds his telescope, built that Leviathan, but this is his idea, portable. After, I guess if you have a telescope the size of a house, this is a portable. But they do great stuff too. You guys, I really appreciate that you go out, you do a lot of public outreach and show them, even if people turn on their sprinklers on you and stuff like that. There's a couple of stories. But they go out and get out and show people, and not just views. I mean, Randy has first-class equipment, so they get to see really what the sun's all about, share great information. So, we tell their whole story and a couple of things about a tarantula in issue number 87. More Randy's work. Again, his specialty is not so much the disc, but zooming in on that stuff, and that takes a special kind of talent. So, good stuff. And then I have to tell on Randy, he turned to the dark side. After 40 years solar, keeping his reputation, he soiled it last winter star party, and delved not just into deep sky, but narrowband imaging. So No, Randy, you jumped in and got there really quickly, do beautiful stuff. So, yeah, he's multi-dimensional now. He's maybe, because Randy is pretty focused. He was there talking, he was talking, who were you talking? Oh, Richard Wright. Talking to Richard Wright, for about 15 minutes, and they were getting into deep how to, eliminate this band path and stuff like that. And then I said something after 15 minutes, he looks at me, oh, I was just going to see you. So Randy is a focused individual. Pat Freeman, again, another one, and we told the story in 127. I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly. But Pat does some phenomenal stuff, retired, moved to Chiefland, built a number of observatories, and does just beautiful work. I tell you, the squid and the whale, that is one of the most phenomenally difficult things I have ever attempted. I've shot 8 hours on it, and it wasn't even an entry. I mean, you've got to go really long. The O3 is extremely faint, very tough. Pat does beautiful work. He's built he built a couple of observatories. His wife likes to quilt, so it's called the Quilted Stars or something like that observatory. So yes, you guys should have a lot of, but he recently, and in the next issue, he's got this old dome that they moved down from a friend of his. And I said, write how you did that, because he moved the old dome down, kind of updated it, automated it, and everything else. Makes a fascinating story. So our next issue is going to have kind of how he did that. John Talbot I featured before. I just want to mention, well, John, if you don't know John was a hurricane hunter. So when everybody is fleeing hurricanes and trying to get gas in their vehicle to get out of state, John and his crew hop in a plane and fly into the center of the hurricane for years. He's retired now. I asked him if he's going to keep his pilot's license. He goes, I'm alive after doing that for 14 years. No, I'm happy to be ground-based. But he does this incredible thing, and he does a feature in the magazine where he works with professional astronomers. Well, they don't get out and have much fun as we do. But they find these research objects that are potential supernova remnants or different things like that, planetary nebula, but they don't have any pictures even once they've established that's what it is. Well, his specialty is imaging, but he has to shoot long, and some of it's exploratory. So he'll shoot 60 hours and there's nothing there. Well, he's got a home observatory, obviously. That would really mess up your star party. Yeah, I shot this thing and it turned out to be nothing. Yeah, that was like the old days with me. I would go, yeah, they're all weak, I didn't get anything. But he does this thing, collaboration, and he's actually been published in a couple of these articles. So it's really interesting, but it's a nice pro-am collaboration because they're working with all the scientific data, but they don't have a picture. And no matter who you are, you like to be able to see what you're talking about. So it's nicely illustrated. And Jeffrey Horn, one more person, he goes deep, and I'm going to fly through this, but he did something really interesting in that he also found something. And you see the little speck up there, he does these wide field things. Well, he is detailed enough that he looks at his images to find out and go, that shouldn't be there. I'd look at that image and go, wow, that's just, yeah, there's a little speck up there. Well, it turned out to be something, and they imaged it at greater detail. Anyway, it turned out he also did discover this planetary nebula, and was able to name her after his father, who was a good friend of mine in Nashville, just before he passed away. So it was really cool. So Star People Q. We got a few things coming up. We are not going to stop doing this. We've done 208. Next issue, anybody familiar with Trevor Jones and Astro Backyard? Fascinating young man. He and his wife Ashley run that site. And so we got his backstory that's coming up. One of my heroes, Admiral Ray Jones. So he ran how many people do you know that were an admiral that ran a nuclear submarine? He has stories. He can only tell you short parts of it because a lot of it's classified information. Ray is, and this was just taken last month, he's 87, standing from his rig. He's got a 16-inch RCO Arcos in the dome there. And he's saying, I might be getting a little old for this. I was like, Ray, you keep going because you are giving me. He also happened to be an expert fly fisherman and not a scratch golfer, but he's got like a 4 handicap. Amazing individual. So yeah, these are the kind of people that I discover in this hobby that are just phenomenal. Jason Adamick, that's his new, I think a 22-inch telescope he just got. He's a painter. He actually makes a living out in the area of Taos, New Mexico. phenomenal painting. Interesting backstory on him. We got him coming up. Richard Jekyll, who wrote, author, wrote Galaxy, some other things. So we got some fascinating people. This is by popular request. We did a profile of Pran Hyseni. How many people are familiar with him? She's gained quite a bit of notoriety back in '86, but when we did, we knew she was a person of interest. She was doing outreach to these schools. She was traveling the United States from her home country of Kosovo, and we just said, this is an unusual person, so we profiled her. But since that time, a lot has happened. She's got a PhD, she's opened an observatory down in Kosovo, she launches stuff as an ambassador for Celestron. There she is with the president of Kosovo, so people keep saying, we need to do an update. So we're gonna do an update on her coming up. So anyway, that is it. I promise I won't go through the 188. Wanted to cover some, but I want to leave you with this. And these are some shots that I took here at Winter Star Party campus. Purpose to live in the moment and continue to expand your knowledge and skills with a balance of preparation and inspiration. And that's I think that's well said. Has a balance there. Enjoy the wonders of the universe and the amazing terrestrial ball that we inhabit. And take some time. Again, more shots from right here. It's just a gorgeous campus. This is an amazing event. Take time to absorb the beauty around you. Contemplate its nature, ask some beautiful questions, and strive to expand your understanding of the natural world and your relationship and place within it. Also remember to take some time, the key part, to get to know the ordinary people around you doing extraordinary things, because there are as many fascinating things happening in and around us with the people that are around us as they're up in the sky. So yeah, enjoy the cosmos with an attitude of expectant discovery like our star people. So, hey, we would love to have your support. If you do, we'd love to subscribe. I want you to think about writing about your experience. I think you'll find it an interesting experience. You may find you have a talent that you like. If you take beautiful images, send it to us. Editor at amateurastronomy.com. Send it in. Snap what you have, send it to us. And support our sponsors, of course. We'd love to also have you find more star people for us. Who are interesting people? Most of them come. Somebody asked me, how do you find your star people? I said, they find them for us. They say, this person's really interesting. Some of them I obviously meet as well. So just a final thing, if you aren't familiar, our subscriptions are $34 a year, $18 for digital, mere pennies a day. Dual format, $44. We're doing a WSP special. If you want to get 31 years on a thumb drive, that's 125 issues, $100. We've got them here today. If you're a non-subscriber, you can add a dual subscription, so about $170 value for $125. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you to the WSP staff for inviting me and to putting this amazing event together. Thank you all for your time this afternoon.